What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? Happy Friday. Guys, we are back. So last week I missed happy hour live stream because I was in Los Angeles and it just was what it was. The internet connection sucked in Los Angeles so badly. That was why I actually didn't post much of any content while I was out there because it sucked. It sucked. But I'm glad to be back with happy hour live stream this week. Happy hour live stream is something I do. I think I'm trying to make it a really consistent thing on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern time where I pick out a woke training of some sort and we kind of react to it and make fun of it. And it's a group activity. It is a group activity to help maintain our sanity during these rather insane times. Now, because it is happy hour and it is Friday, it's always happy hour somewhere. I do have a drink of choice in hand because really, I just can't watch this many woke things without drinking. So I do have my Prosecco today in hand, my giant wine glass. Cheers to everyone. If you have a drink in hand, whether it be water, tea, or something stronger, let us know what you're drinking in the chat. And cheers to you. All right. John asked, did I hang out with Joshua? I did actually hang out with Joshua in Los Angeles. We went out to lunch. That was really nice. And then I actually had a meetup with my locals community. So this is actually perfect. I actually had my first in-person meetup with my locals community, which was really awesome. Now, if you have not yet joined my locals community, this is like the perfect time to do it. Guys, we're going to be doing so much cool stuff in my locals community. I've got a lot of things planned. We are going to be doing a book club next month. We're all reading Rules for Radicals together. We're going to have a chat about that. I'm going to be launching a debate club in the next couple of days so people can sign up and have civilized human debates on topics. And what's going to be interesting about my debate club is you aren't going to get to pick your position. You are going to be assigned a position. So you might end up arguing a topic you agree with. You might end up arguing a topic that you disagree with, but we need to do these things in order to really hone our positions, understand our arguments, and it's just a lot of fun. We also do Zoom calls twice a week in my locals. We do them on Tuesdays and Thursdays just to get together as a community to talk about what's going on in our lives, and it does act as a little support group. So kb.locals.com, definitely join. You can sign up. You can actually join for free just to see if you like the locals community. But if you want to support my work and get access to all the features, it does come at a cost of $5 a month, less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Other ways you can support my work is I actually just yesterday launched a Substack. It's carlin.substack.com, and it's going to be built around this new newsletter. And I'm actually building a whole platform for this stuff called Actively Unwoke. I'm going to be writing long form articles about how to fight back against the woke in your everyday life. I actually just posted the first article this morning. It was all about self-care in the time of woke. So making sure you're taking care of yourself so you have the resources you need to fight back against the woke. And then if you just want general news and updates, you can head over to drcarlin.com, get on my mailing list right here, and you will get updates when things go out. But definitely, like, if you had to pick one of the three things, I would join my locals, because my locals is kind of like my central hub for everything. All of my videos are there, all ad free, of course, unlike YouTube. That's the place I would go. All right, it looks like everyone's in. We got some tea drinkers, we got some Mountain Dew drinkers, and I get that, man. I get that. I haven't had Mountain Dew in years, but I remember when there used to be like that red Mountain Dew. I really liked that red Mountain Dew a lot. That was like way back in the day. Grandma's got some vodka. Oh, Grandma's partying early this morning. This afternoon, I suppose. 2 p.m. What is it, like 2 p.m. here? Not. It's fine. I used to run a coaching group for managers who were like, right when the pandemic started, who were transitioning their teams to virtual working environments. And we met at noon on Fridays, and one of them always had a drink in hand, always, because it's Friday. It's Friday. All right. So the webinar that we're going to be looking at today, let me pull it up. Now, I am going into this. Justice. Oh my God. Justice is a member of my locals community, and I love his chat here. My drink of choice are the tears of Democrats being against Caitlyn Jenner as I dunk on them for being transphobes. Guys, it is basically Caitlyn Jenner Day. Caitlyn Jenner, if you've been living under a rock, if you haven't heard the news, is running for governor of California. And it's the best thing that ever has happened, ever. And I love it. And I am so hoping that the Republicans don't squander this very precious opportunity to completely disrupt the narrative that the right hates trans people. If the Republicans don't take advantage, like, I'm going to be honest, like, I have not been happy with the Republican response that I've seen about this today. And I'm going to give the Republicans a little bit of time to get their stuff together, but I'm like about this far away from just cutting and running from the Republican Party and saying, you guys have fun with your complaining and your whining and you're never doing anything and you're electing stupid candidates. Like, I'm out. I'm going to go join the Libertarians, because if I'm going to lose, I might as well lose with people who at least have convictions. You know, I'll go hang out with I'm going to be hanging out with the Mises Caucus tomorrow night anyway. So why not get an early start? That's kind of where I'm at. But please do not mess this up, guys. Please, come on. This is like, every Republican should be going, hallelujah, thank you, God, for this amazing development. Naruto says, I'm always amazed at how the generation raised on Family Guy, South Park, and The Simpsons became the party of don't offend me. It is a little bit weird, isn't it? All right, cheers. All right. Oh, and by the way, before we get into it, you know what you need to do? You need to mount that like button, guys. We don't smash the like button on my channel. We mount the like button. So mount that like button. Let YouTube know, because they never show my content to people who aren't subscribed anymore. Let them know this is good stuff. All right. Let me share and get this all set up so the sound works. Whiteness at work. Share audio. All right, so we can see that. So this is honestly just a random Whiteness at work webinar that I happened to find this morning. I was like, I did everything at the last minute. I was like, I need to find something to react to. So I Googled around. We've got a 1-hour training module here. And actually, before I share the sound, let me share just the page in general, because I want to read about this company that does this webinar. So this is an actual, we haven't done a workplace training for Happy Hour Friday yet. Not like a real one. We've done like some college stuff, but this is actually by a company, is one of those companies that that organizations outsource their anti-racism training to. So Whiteness at Work. Let's imagine new ways of working. Build your anti-racist analysis as individuals, as teams, as leaders through Whiteness at Work. Let's just read what they have to say. People, particularly white people, are realizing this in ways they never have before. Organizations have a responsibility to learn from the lessons of the pandemic and the constant struggle for Black lives, and use this and the use of state-sanctioned violence. We have a responsibility to stop the harm that is happening to people of color within our organizations. This requires skills most of us don't have. It requires imagining new ways of working and sharing power. It's an ongoing commitment to interpersonal and organizational growth. It requires explicit conversations about how white supremacy manifests in our policies and practices and relationships and cultures. Whiteness at Work is a self-paced and on-demand 4-module program to help you and your colleagues develop shared language, framework, skills around white dominant culture, anti-Blackness institutional racism, and racial equity. So I think we're only watching the first module today, but you guys can see we've got some. Oh God, I didn't even look at this before. Oh my goodness, guys, I have a feeling. We're in for a bit of a doozy. All right, who is ready to get started? Everyone mounted that like button. You guys ready to get started with our training today? Chat in and let me know, and I will share this again and hopefully set the audio up correctly. Chrome tab, share audio, boom. All right, I'm going to see if I can do a full screen. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. I want to get this as big as possible. That looks like it's going to be about what it is. All right. I'm going to get the chat on the screen. Let's light it up. All right, let's dig into it.
All right. We are recording. Welcome so
And let me know if you guys can hear the audio just for like...
I'm Desiree Attaway, principal and founder of the Attaway Group. And really I'm excited to spend the next 60 minutes with all of y'all learning and building community and really pushing and exploring a lot around what do we need to unlearn so that we can do this work better and show up better for one another. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant, I'm a trainer, I'm a coach. I'm a speaker. I help organizations build resilient, equitable, and inclusive orgs. I help people hold visions for themselves, their workplaces, and their communities until they can hold it for themselves. So I help with that visioning and with the real actionable steps that get us there. The Black Attaway Group is a Black-owned firm, and just wanted to revel and have joy in that moment. So before we get started,
Hire us because we are Black owned.
there's something I really wanted to say. There are a lot of folks who are new to my teaching and new to the way that Jessica and I do this work. And for me, this work is ultimately about making sure I am not bringing more harm to people of color in your organizations, especially
Wait. Yeah.
Black folks.
So she just said that her primary concern is making sure she's not bringing more harm to people of color in organizations, especially Black folks. Wouldn't a better goal be, my goal is to make sure I'm not bringing harm to anyone in your organization, full stop? Why is it okay to bring harm to some communities more than it's okay to bring harm to other communities? That makes no sense. And what is even meant by harm? What does she mean when she says harm? Is it physical harm? Is it emotional harm? What is the definition?
So I just want to say and reiterate something we put in the email. If you are Black staff and you're here in this moment, we will be addressing white people a lot.
This is a webinar for white people, so if we come across as harsh towards white people, just know it is for their own good. It is for their own good that we're going to tell off white people today. It is not directed at you, Black people who have infiltrated this webinar. So everyone in the chat, if you're not white, just know that not everything they're saying is not directed at you. I hope no one takes offense.
Right? And with everything that's happening between the uprisings and state violence, the exhaustion that it takes to be Black every day in this country, please do not stay and listen to anything that will not be in support of your ultimate mental health and well-being.
So she has just admitted within the first 2 minutes of this webinar that the things that they say are not necessarily going to be good for mental health and well-being, but oh, you want to be louder? Okay, let me see. Like, okay, that seems to be as loud as I can get it for them, but I'm sorry. No, but what she just said is essentially that that it's okay to do emotional harm to white people, but Black people, if you're feeling harmed by the things that I'm saying in this webinar, you need to take care of your emotional health and leave and don't watch this webinar. That's exactly what she just said. Yeah.
I invite you to leave if it gets too much for you, because really this is a lot of addressing what white people need to do to help mitigate whiteness at work. So I invite you to really take that to heart.
And just to reiterate, also for teams and organizations that plan on debriefing this together, please also communicate that that is optional for your Black staff as well.
Thank you.
It is optional. Well, you know what? This is actually the basis of laws like HB 544 in New Hampshire, because I'm sorry, no one should be required to do training like this. If you want to go do crazy anti-racist training where they call you racist for an hour, that's fine. But the state in particular should never, ever, ever be mandating that people on the basis of their race sit through training like this. That just makes absolutely no godly sense. And yeah, John said in the chat, oh my God, the white girl interrupted the Black lady. I'm sure she'll learn her place.
That, Jessica, yeah. Two more things that really want us to bring into place. And one is that this hour is going to raise a lot more questions for you than answers. And we're going to be holding some more sessions over the summer. So don't be like, oh, I didn't get to that. They didn't talk about that thing that I need to know. We're going to be continuing to have these sessions over the summer. And so today is about some unlearning of some foundational pieces. Jessica, anything you want to add right now?
Yeah, so just a couple logistical pieces. For those of you who would like closed captioning, at the bottom of everyone's screen, there should be a CC closed caption button. We have Tammy, our incredible live captioner, here with us today. Thank you so much, Tammy. You can also control the size of your closed captions by clicking on a video settings button that should be on the up arrow on your video over there. We're also being recording the closed captions to the recording as well. So there are so many folks here and a lot of folks who didn't get in live to this session. So you're all special. And because of that, we're not going to be super interactive today. So there isn't a chat box. Everybody's.
I will bet you I will bet you more money than I paid for this cheap bottle of wine that this is not a well-attended webinar, and the reason they're not allowing the chat is because like there weren't really that many people there and they don't want to expose that no one came to this webinar. I'm just going to pause at that.
Video and mic are muted. And so we do have this Q&A
And yes, you are all special.
And I would just ask
You're
that
all
you
special.
use that to
Congratulations.
ask questions about technology or something pertinent, and not use it as a chat function, because we have our teammates Rosie and Raven who are going to be monitoring that. And looks like we already have about 620 of those. You can click on.
I don't believe that for one red solitary second. I could be wrong, but I don't believe her that she has 620 people watching this. Alexander DeJohn said, "It's funny. I just went through this training last week in my job." You went through this specific training? Are you serious? That's hilarious.
Answered, and to see if somebody else has asked your question. And finally, we have to thank the incredible team at Wayward Kind who built our website and have been helping us nonstop this week to make sure everything was ready to go for this. Our captioner, Tammy, Raven, Rosie, all of our family and friends. Thank you so much to Erica and Pam and your support. And also to all of the scholars, the thinkers, the activists, artists, and healers on whose shoulders we stand today.
Yeah, thank y'all for that. So let's dig in.
I am shocked that they did not do a land blessing. I'm shocked. Maybe it's because it's virtual, but we usually know to expect a good land blessing at the top of these things. So that's surprising.
So this is who we are. I would like to acknowledge right now that
Wait.
I am sitting and working in
Land
Birmingham,
blessing!
Alabama, and I
Land
am
blessing!
on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Muskogee and the Creek people, in which we're learning.
I spoke too soon. Land blessing. Viking Insane says you would have to be special to attend this willingly.
And working together today.
Yeah, land blessing, drink, land blessing.
I want to just briefly talk about why a land acknowledgement is important.
Oh,
and
good.
That's because
we not only get a land acknowledgement, we also get an explanation. We get a history lesson.
Anyone that's not Indigenous is living on a settler colonial situation right now. Right. Therefore, all non-Indigenous people living in what today we call the U.S. are settlers, and we're all living
colonizers.
On stolen land. And settlers.
We are all living on stolen land. Alexander says, not this one specifically, but diversity training telling us to make more POC friends. And I asked what this had to do with our work. What did they say? You don't have to super chat in the answer to, but like, what did they say when you asked what they had to do with work?
Do not all benefit equally from settler colonialism. Many people were brought to this country as slaves, as indentured servants, right, as refugees, and race and class play a big part in the way and who and which settlers benefit most from the stolen Indigenous land.
Well, I have like 1/24 Native American blood in me, so I'm not a colonizer. I'm just saying.
So I'll let Jessica introduce herself.
All right, so Jessica, she, her, hers. I'm an educator, a facilitator, and a researcher. My career has been devoted to justice work and the last decade to racial justice work. I live on the stolen lands of the Tongva and Chumash, known as Los Angeles.
I live in the stolen lands of Los Angeles. Why don't, like, okay, so here's my question. Like, with these land blessings, if they're really so, like, you know, apologetic over living on stolen land, then why don't they move back to where their ancestors were from? Like, why? Like, if okay, say like so I'm like French and Irish, right? So like, if I was giving this webinar, then if I actually felt so strongly about this, why wouldn't I just move back to France to go back to my indigenous homeland? But no, they don't. It's not the point. They don't care about any of this.
With my partner,
It's the same like with these like white fucking liberal actors that always virtue signal on Twitter. I'm like, okay, well, when are you planning on giving up that role on that hit TV show to give it to a black trans woman? Because really, like, you're in a privileged position of having a starring role on a hit TV show. When are you going to decolonize your TV show and give that role to a black trans woman?
and a parakeet that recently showed up on my bird feeder, who has since taken over my life. And you may hear him during this call, but he has pretty much agreed that he'll try to stay quiet.
Awesome. I heard folks are requesting that I speak up, so I am going to make that happen.
See, she heard your complaints.
We're going to actually turn off our cameras now so that we can dig into teaching and y'all don't have to see our faces over the recording. So we're turning off our cameras so we can dig in. So in this moment, right, Black communities were already deeply hurting over Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. We were already in crisis and in pain over the countless like living while Black moments that get documented on video over the course of the past 6 weeks, whether we're walking in Central Park or we're just trying to use a gym in our local WeWorks building, right? And
oh, side note on WeWork. WeWork is a messed up toxic company. Don't ever go to work for WeWork. I know way too much about the inner workings of WeWork. Just like pro tip, toxic, bad company, bad.
And so we're already mourning, on top of all of this, the disproportionate deaths from COVID-19. And then George Floyd happens, right? So in this time and in these moments, we cannot afford not to focus on race and racial equity.
Why?
When politically and socially and economically and environmentally, our laws, our rules, our policies and regulations don't work for Black people, then they don't work for anyone.
What does that have anything to do with the work environment? This is specifically called whiteness at work. What does any of that have to do with creating a more successful or more engaging or more productive or more fulfilling work environment? It doesn't. Von Cobra says, oh, just wait, Carlin. I'm sure the nice racism will be sending the whites back to Europe. Hey, man, I've never been to Paris or Ireland for that matter.
Right. And so in light of all of these national events, the pandemic, police violence, the ongoing struggle for Black lives and uprising across the country, we find ourselves at a moment where we need to have more direct conversations around ending racism in our communities and in our workspaces.
What does racism mean? How are you defining racism? We all know the answer to that. They're going to talk about systemic racism, not like, you know, actual racism.
And in my 25-year career, I have never seen this level of questioning and searching around systemic racism and anti-Blackness in particular.
Systemic racism. Yeah.
Here's some tweets that have popped up recently, right? So for everybody that has been putting out.
All right, I'm going to read the tweets because what I've learned in watching these webinars is frequently what these trainers do is they put things on the screen and then they never read them. So we're going to read the tweets. The first one says, any job interview I have from here out, when they ask if I have questions for them, how did your office respond to protect the health and safety of your employees during the coronavirus outbreak? I actually think that that's kind of, I mean, like, you guys know, like, I'm not afraid of the virus at all, but I actually think that that's kind of a legit question, so I'm not going to ding that one too much. I mean, like, you know, it's back in the day when this webinar took place, it was a more legitimate question than it is now. And then the other one, right now, every employer in America is terrified that their Black employees will be honest about their work experience. No, wrong. Every employer in America is afraid that their white liberal employees are going to rebel against them and not do and because they're not doing enough to combat systemic racism. That's what they're afraid of. And they shouldn't be. They should do exactly what Coinbase did and offer a severance package to anyone who wants to bring these issues into work, because this type of information, or not information, but this type of material is going to absolutely kill work environments. And frankly, any CEO that embraces it deserves exactly what they're going to get.
Out statements. How are your office going to respond to the health and safety of your employees during this outbreak?
And why would she assume that that is actually just a question for Black people? P.S. Like, I'm sure many white people were actually interested in that question as well.
And are you worried that any Black employees you may have would be really honest about their experience working with you?
Oh, Robert, don't worry about it, my friend. You just take care of yourself, and I appreciate your support. Just make sure you mount that like button, man. Mount the like button, share it out. I appreciate it.
All right, so as Desiree and I often say, we love a framework. And this is really the framework that we base all of our work on. It is deceptively simple, it is alliterative, and it works on individual and organizational levels.
Did you just hear the qualification she had for a good framework? It's simple and it's alliterative, and those are the things that really matter the most.
It was developed by Dr. Barbara J. Love, who is an extraordinary human being. So the first stage here is awareness. And this looks like the recognition that
CBS already is.
There's
They already
dissonance. Something just doesn't add up anymore. You've been awoken to something. And it may stem from this deeper level of noticing. Right?
She just used the term awoken. You've been awoken to something.
Right, so just why is it that it takes a younger woman so much longer at our organization to get promoted? Or it might be spurred from a big bang moment, your Starbucks moment. It starts a process of questioning. And so what happens here most of the time in organizations and as individuals is that we jump from awareness straight to action. The desire to fix overpowers the necessity of developing an analysis about the real root cause of what's going on.
No, that's incorrect. No.
And when we do this,
No. Every organization, well, at least the ones that I've worked with, I suppose I can't speak for every organization, but most of the organizations that I've worked, I will say that is true sometimes. Sometimes they think they've spotted a problem and they jump right into like, how do we fix the problem? But most of the time there's research involved, there's surveying involved, there's different strategy sessions involved. The problem is that most people are just not privy to all of that information. So what she just said is not correct.
This work, we often cause harm by jumping from awareness to action, not stopping in this middle ground of analysis.
What she's saying is you're causing harm because you don't take the time to consider that all the problems in your organization are a result of systemic racism. And if you did your analysis, you wouldn't cause harm because you know that all of the problems in your organization come from systemic racism. That's what she's really saying right now.
And this is where we're asked to slow down, to listen, to learn. This is where we ensure that the right people are at the table, that we develop an analysis about what is going on, who is most impacted, and we ensure that they are given power and will be leading us into the taking action, the third step. So we want to be committed to taking the next right best action, the action that is going to cause the least amount of harm and have the most impact.
I am still wondering how they're defining harm. Let's make sure we're listening to this. How are they defining harm? When they're saying we want to cause the least amount of harm, what does that even mean?
Dr. Love reminds us that it is in this step we provide assistance to each other in adjusting our perspective, our language, our behavior in the course of our work and in the pursuit of liberation. So finally, we want to think about accountability, and allyship. So who are we in community with that will hold us accountable? What is that going to look like? How are we going to measure progress? Ensuring that the course correcting is always an option, that the path to liberation isn't going to be clear cut.
Why does a work environment want its employees to be liberated? This is for the work environment. Why are we talking about a path to liberation in the work environment?
This has been a core missing component of a lot of those organizational statements that have gone out in the last week in support of Black Lives Matter. Who's going to hold you accountable to all of these lofty goals that you're setting out? But we also have to always remember that accountability isn't punitive. When it's done
really?
in care and community, it is really about deepening our analysis, our commitment, and our transparency.
Accountability isn't punitive. Oh, really? I think that anyone who has ever been canceled might have a different thought about whether or not accountability is punitive. That makes no godly sense.
Accountability is deep love and kinship. We only hold those.
Accountability, she just said, if you didn't hear it, accountability is deep love and commitment, I believe. Let me just rewind that real quick. That was hilarious.
Isn't punitive. When it's done in care and community, it is really about deepening our analysis, our commitment, and our transparency.
Accountability is deep love and kinship.
Kinship. Accountability is deep love and kinship. I'm just curious, how many people in the chat have been canceled before? Did you feel deep love and kinship when you experienced your cancellation, when they were just saying, we're just holding you accountable? Oh my God.
We only hold those accountable that we care about.
We only hold those accountable that we care about. Well, what? Then why have I been canceled 4 times in the last year? Mostly by people who have never met me before. Why do I have like crazy people on the internet trying to get me arrested by the FBI because they love me? They love me and they want me to be happy in jail.
So Jessica and I love a good.
Okay. White supremacy. Let's read our definition. White supremacy is a political, economic, and cultural system in which whites overwhelmingly control power and material resources. Conscious and unconscious ideas of white supremacy and entitlement are widespread, and relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenacted across a broad array of institutions and social settings. All right, guys, if you think this definition of white supremacy is bullshit, go ahead and mount that like button for me, just so, just because nonsense.
Good framework, but we also always ground ourselves in some understanding of shared language.
Yeah, Godar Bazaar says, I felt kinship when I was canceled and doxxed over liking a flipping Harry Potter character. Someone actually sent me, you'll like this, Godar Bazaar. Someone actually sent me old screenshots from Ravelry today where apparently there was this one pattern in the, that was like a Harry Potter knitting pattern, and the icon for it was grayed out, and it said on it something like, this icon has been taken down in solidarity with trans people, and the author of the pattern wrote a massive apology letter for posting a Harry Potter pattern. Alexander says, oh, by the way, I also posted that study about the masks, just the link to the study, and just said it seems that masks are a waste of money. I got fact checked. Yeah, YouTube has already demonetized that video, and they said that I was causing danger or harm by reading a study from the NIH, which I can't really say I'm surprised, but whatevs.
And so white supremacy. It is a historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, of nations, of peoples of color by white peoples for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. What's
wrong with Harry Potter is J.K. Rowling is a transphobe, according to these people. Although Although, remember, now we have a golden opportunity to call all of them transphobes if they don't agree with Caitlyn Jenner. So this is why we need to embrace Caitlyn Jenner running for governor, people.
The socialization into whiteness is all-encompassing. It makes it hard for individual white people to see racism as a system, as a...
The socialization into whiteness is all-encompassing. Okay. Based on what data? Robin DiAngelo?
Form of comprehensive oppression. The goal of understanding and challenging whiteness isn't to hate individual white people. It's to understand whiteness, to learn about whiteness, to leverage whiteness, and to use it to dismantle white supremacy. When we talk about whiteness, we're...
Well, okay, so their definition of white supremacy here, basically it's all about power, right? They actually say whites have overwhelming control, power, and material resources, conscious and unconscious ideas. This is all about power. So when they're talking about dismantling white supremacy, what they're really saying is we want control over everything. This is why they're framing it like this. This is actually, I mean, this is like a brilliant branding maneuver, right? Because now they can call anyone who does not agree with dismantling our entire system. They can call them a racist, even if it's just like, no, we don't want your little Marxist utopia. We don't want that.
We're talking about that tint of whiteness. We are not talking about individual white people.
We're not talking about individual white people. We're just making broad accusations that all white people think and see the world the same and behave in the same way. But we're not talking about individuals. We're just saying you all do the same thing.
Anti-Blackness. For a lot of y'all, this may be a term that's new. But anti-Blackness is one way that some Black scholars have really been able to articulate what it means to be marked as Black in an anti-Black world.
Yeah, this is exactly correct, Emily. Oh, my mistake, getting yelled at, judged, and thrown out of a business because I won't wear a mask. That was hope. It was kindness. It was kinship. They're just trying to help you. They're trying to help you be better.
Anti-Blackness describes the inability to recognize Black humanity. It captures...
All right, let's read our definition because she's not reading it. Anti-Blackness, the word racism is everywhere. It's used to explain all the things that cause African American suffering and death. Inadequate access to healthcare, food, housing, and jobs, or a police bullet, baton, or knee. But racism fails to fully capture what Black people in this country are facing. The right term is anti-Blackness. Why don't they care about brown people or Native American people? We all know the answer to that. This is much more useful in terms of advancing their narrative. But if they really cared about racism, it wouldn't be just about one group of people. It would be about all people, including Roddy, our Asian supremacist in the chat.
The reality that the kind of violence that saturates Black life is not based on specific things a Black person does, right? It is better described as a person who has been racialized Black did. The violence that we experience as Black people isn't tied necessarily to a particular transgression. The violence of anti-Blackness is gratuitous and it is unrelenting.
Based on, they have not presented any data yet to support any of these claims.
So we can talk about racism and racism against Black people, but that really kind of oversimplifies it.
We could talk about racism against Black people, but we're not going to do that. It's too simple. So they just dismiss the entire purpose of this entire thing. And they still aren't talking about the workplace yet either.
It is a framework that really highlights society's inability to recognize the humanity of Black people. It shows disdain for Black people, disregard for Black people, and even disgust for Black people.
I mean, if this presenter thinks that, we have this, that all sounds incredibly racist to me, to be really honest. Like, she's making assumptions about an entire broad group of people based on nothing other than the color of their skin, that they have disdain for another population and disgust towards another population. That sounds kind of racist.
Yeah, so the framing of our conversation today is really going to be on zeroing in on anti-Blackness. And obviously there's a much larger conversation and
Yes,
way in
she
which structural
does.
racism impacts communities of color, Indigenous and Native communities in particular. But today we're really going to be focusing on looking at white supremacy and anti-Blackness. All right, so I am sure that most of the folks here have attended a DEI training, you've done your implicit bias training, and what Desiree and I find is when we walk into organizations, basically each one of them have a different definition of these terms, and more often than not, every team or individual has a different explanation. So we're going to share our definitions quickly so that going forward, we're all on the same page, and hopefully you can talk about this with your own team. So when we talk about diversity, we are talking about all of the ways in which individuals and groups of individuals differ. The term simply describes the presence of these people. So often in our organizations, diversity is a code word for race, and it's typically tied to optics. So
well, she just said the quiet part out loud, didn't she? She just said, often in organizations, diversity is a code word for race. Now, when I think of diversity, I actually don't think of race. I actually think of just different people coming together and trying their best to collaborate and get along. That's how I've always defined diversity. Diversity can be any number of things. It could be race, it could be gender, it could be sexual orientation, it could be those like immutable characteristics. It could also be approach. But of course, they only mean it in terms of one thing.
This is when your organization has the same few pictures of staff of color on every piece of collateral. Or your diversity metrics show.
If you highlight our staff of color on collateral, that means you're racist. What? It's like you damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you have the staff of color on your collateral, then you're racist. If you don't have the staff of color on your collateral, then you're racist.
That you've increased the number of women and people of color at the organization, but you actually fail to mention that they've all been hired into entry-level roles.
So okay, so she basically just said that like it's only okay to talk about hiring women and people of color when they're in non-entry. What is wrong with being hired into an entry-level role? There's nothing wrong with being hired into an entry-level role. Entry-level roles allow you to gain experience in the organization. Is the expectation that anytime someone is hired in an organization that is not a white male, that they will be hired into a non-entry level role? Is that the definition of racism that we're talking about? That it is racist to put everyone who is not that is not a white male in an entry level role? That makes no sense. What if they have no experience? What if there is a Black trans woman job applicant who is amazing and has absolutely no experience? Is it racist to put her in an entry level role?
So diversity is something that you count, whereas inclusion is something that you feel. An inclusive culture enables people who carry different social identities to lead, to be given power, and succeed in different self-determined and authentic ways.
No, that's not what inclusion is. Inclusion is feeling as though you belong in an organization. And that includes all people, including those straight white men.
It involves creating environments where any individual or group is welcomed, respected, supported.
Any individual or group. That is the key term. Any individual or group.
And asked to participate and to lead. So now we get to equity. And equity is where we ensure that every person has exactly what they need to thrive.
No.
So a lot of us tend to.
That's not what the definition of equity is. That's not what it is. That is the definition of equality. What she just said. You have the opportunity to be successful there. We were going to give you the support and the resources you need to be successful. Whether or not you take advantage of that is up to you. What she just described is equality, not equity.
To think about equality.
And by the way, there is, organizations should be making sure that everyone in their organization, regardless of their race or their gender, any of those things, they should be making sure that they have what they need to be successful. But that's not what equity is.
Sometimes we mix up equality with equity.
Like you just did.
Equality actually just says we're going to treat everybody the same and it's all going to work out.
No.
Well, that's not true. Equity says that we all have different starting places and that we all have different needs.
We are talking about the goddamn workplace. When you're setting people up to succeed in the workplace, it's about making sure their boss understands what they need, they have the resources to do the job. This is not about creating a goddamn communist utopia.
So this is something I'm sure many of the white folks on this call have come to realize over the last few weeks, that we started that race to the finish line much further along simply by being white with all of the systemic advantages we're.
I'm sure those white folks that grew up in Appalachia without a, indoor plumbing feel like they started ahead of the pack. I'm sure my husband, who grew up in Ukraine, literally did not, his family still doesn't really have indoor plumbing. I'm sure he feels like he had an advantage over everyone else when he came to the United States and had no money and had to work in kitchens and things like that. I'm sure he felt like he had an advantage, yeah.
Given. So organizationally, equity is really about the fair and just treatment of people, demonstrated through the acknowledgement that systemically individuals have vastly different access to opportunities and thus need different.
If you are talking about this being applied in the workplace, then it has no relevance to bring up individuals don't have access to these opportunities. Guess what? If they've been hired into the workplace, they literally have access to opportunities. If they are in the workplace, they literally have access to opportunities. All they need to do is show up and perform and get along with their coworkers and not call everyone out for their racism all the time, and they will find opportunities. The problem is when people like this convince people that they don't have access to these opportunities, even if they already have the damn job.
Different resources to be successful. And so we're talking about this in terms of culture, in terms of policies, processes, trainings, systems, and structures. So, go ahead, Desiree.
No, I have nothing to add. You're perfect.
Okay.
Just taking a quick pause, folks. If you like what you're watching so far, please make sure to mount that like button for me. I appreciate it.
Wonderful.
All right, so we've covered that a lot of you have been to these DEI trainings or bias trainings.
Nancy says the hundreds of millions that are wasted here would be better served in the actual communities they claim to care about so much. I agree. Where is that money? Where are those billions of dollars that Black Lives Matter raised? Where is it? What has it been done with? Who's benefited from it? What Black-owned businesses have they helped rebuild?
Trainings, and we're going to bet that they didn't prepare you for this moment in time. And that is because DEI is not racial equity or anti-racism work.
If you thought that you were doing anti-racism work with diversity, equity, and inclusion, you were wrong. We're going beyond that. We're going next level anti-racism work.
Desiree and I center racial equity, which she's going to talk more about. And this is how we define it. So it's the condition when race does not determine or predict the distribution of resources, opportunities, and burdens on groups.
Okay. Racial equity, the condition in which race does not predict the opportunities or distribution of resources for certain groups. Race doesn't predict that. What evidence are they providing to even say that race has anything to do with that? I want evidence, and I want evidence that doesn't relate it back to socioeconomic status, because any evidence that they provide is going to relate to socioeconomic goddamn status. YBB says, mounting that like button so hard. Thank you, Dr. Crown. Thank you, YBB. I appreciate that.
It is an active process of identifying and eliminating racism and racial bias within an organization. And this is by changing, sometimes overhauling systems, organizational structures, policies, practices, and attitudes so that power and resources are redistributed and shared equitably and lead to real outcomes. So as Key Jackson from Race Forward says, in this approach, race is a strategic priority, not a moral nicety.
So we're going to talk a lot about dominant culture.
Oh my God!
What comprises that?
Oh my God. Guys, they're actually saying the quiet part out loud. They have capitalism. They're saying all of this is related to capitalism. Right there. And Christianity. Holy shit. Wow. Okay.
That, right? So we talked about white supremacy, right? The system of oppression that empowers white people at the expense of people of color. But also, when we think about dominant culture, we want to think about what are those intersections? That's the patriarchy, a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Heterosexism, right? This ideological system that denies, denigrates, and stigmatizes any non-heterosexual form of behavior, of identity, of relationship, or community.
So, fun fact, in Machu Picchu in Peru, there is actually a church with a black Jesus. I'm just saying. It's a fun fact.
We cannot talk about anti-Blackness in this work and not talk about capitalism, right? A capitalist nation is dominated by that free market in which an economic system and both prices and production are dictated by a corporation. And
they're basically saying that capitalism is inherently racist. That is exactly what they're saying. They're saying capitalist environments are anti-black because they're dominated by white people. White people hold all the power. White people hold all the resources. This webinar just... Dude, let's just okay, we need to take a second and wrap our heads around this for a second. This is a webinar specifically designed for the workplace. The workplace. The workplace. That's capitalism. A business is capitalism. And they're saying your entire reason for being is anti-blackness. And it's your job, if you want to be a good anti-racist, to undo your entire reason for being. Otherwise, you are just a racist. That is literally what they're saying right now.
Private companies in competition with one another. It places a heavy focus on private property, economic growth, freedom of choice, and limited government intervention. But the kind of impact that capitalism has on your life depends on whether you're a worker or a boss. Capitalism is a huge driver of inequity, both social and economic. And we always want to have that analysis as we...
Do these people understand that capitalism gives everyone the ability to become their own boss if they want to? Like, nothing is preventing anyone from starting a side hustle. Nothing. I'm sorry. Nothing. If you have a phone, you can start a side hustle. If you have a computer, you can start a side hustle. Literally everyone. Right now, we have enhanced unemployment benefits. People have had enhanced unemployment benefits for the last year. If people have not started a side hustle at this point or tried to do something, that is their own damn fault.
We're doing this work. We also want to talk about Christian hegemony. And this is not about anyone's individual faith or spiritual practice. But we see how the dominant religion in the US sets the tone for our national identity for those who belong and for those who are othered.
If you are a Christian, you are inherently anti-black. Saying the quiet part out loud. I love this webinar.
Right? And so we want to make sure, as we are thinking about how do we create more just and equitable institutions, is what everyday pervasive and systematic set of Christian values and beliefs dominate all aspects of our society, political, social, economic, our workplaces, and how we wield culture.
If your workplace is dominated by Christian belief and you are not a Christian company, that might actually be a problem, but you shouldn't be bringing religion into the workplace as a general rule unless it's directly related to what you do. You shouldn't be bringing religion into the workplace. You shouldn't be bringing politics into the workplace. People should be allowed to believe what they want to believe. We have a First Amendment in this country that protects everyone. Paxton asks, what am I drinking today? I'm drinking a cheap bottle of Barefoot sparkling something or other that my husband bought me at the store yesterday when he said, Carlin, you're doing that happy hour thing. You need a drink. And I said, I probably do. But it's all right. Barefoot is good. Barefoot is like a good cheap wine. And all their stuff is just good. I don't know how they do it because it's definitely cheap, but still tasty.
Power. And then the last piece that I want to highlight as a part of dominant culture is empire, imperialism, right? That policy extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. The greatest thing we want to think about.
So if countries are powerful, they're racist? Do we want, like, holy shit, okay. They're literally arguing that in order for our country to be anti-racist, the country needs to cede power to something. That's what they just argued, right? Am I on glue?
When we think about empire, is through the amount of land that a nation has conquered and expanded. What is the undergirding piece for all of this is power. All of these systems that I just identified.
That is exactly correct. This is all about power. This is not about equity. This is not about racism. This is not about white supremacy. This is not about any of those things. This is all about power. And what they're doing is so brilliant because they're relating white supremacy to the things that they hate, which is capitalism, Christianity, and countries actually having power. Countries that they don't like, you know, this is why they do this. They relate it all back to white supremacy so they can call everyone they disagree with a racist.
All of these structures really determine who gets access to resources, who has the capacity.
They want these organizations to feel guilty about having power. They want these institutions to feel guilty about having power, so they cede and they say, oh, we want to be good. We don't want to be racist. Here, take this power from us. We don't mind giving it up, really. And then they say, thank you for this power, and then they take it over, and they never, ever, 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 ever give it up because it's not about equality. It's only about power.
To direct or influence the behaviors of others or oneself because you have the resources.
So Desiree, a couple of things. All
right, let's read the slide because we know they're not going to. A white dominant culture is one in which white supremacy sets whiteness as the default for societal and organizational norms. Whiteness is the standard for office behavior, workplace values, and the criteria to discern merit. Diversity is tolerated if individuals adopt or conform to already existing cultural norms. The norms can also be replicated in mostly POC or POC-led organizations. So, to me, it sounds a little bit racist to say that, excuse me, guys, it sounds a little bit racist to say that whiteness is the default for things. I don't think whiteness is the default for things. Does anyone in the chat think whiteness is the default for things? Because that sounds incredibly racist, but let's hear them out.
I've been asked to speak a little bit more slowly, and I take full responsibility for that. I tend
The white presenter was just asked to speak more slowly and is feeling very contrite over it. That's hilarious.
To talk fast, so I will slow down. And if you could talk just a little bit louder.
Can do that.
Oh,
awesome. All right, so we're going to talk about white dominant culture. And the majority of you on this call today probably work at organizations that are predominantly, if not entirely white, with leadership teams that are also probably mostly white.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. This is a good question. How are they defining whiteness? How are they defining it? They haven't given us a definition yet.
And this is all within a country that sets whiteness as the default for societal and organizational norms. And we're going to talk more about.
What about China? Does China set whiteness as the default?
About that. So this means that whiteness is the standard for office behavior, workplace values, and the criteria to discern merit, right? So this is everything from how you speak and write to how you dress, how you style your hair, where you went to college, what your work style is. All of that is measured against the white upper middle class experience.
Is it?
This is where we start talking.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't actually think that the white middle class experience is the thing that people are striving for these days when everyone wants to be a rich influencer. Did you guys see this story? There was a story about this couple that basically faked their wedding at like a $5 million mansion, and they just like took over this like that someone else owned, and they faked their wedding there, and they told everyone that this was their estate, and the owner just happened to like drive up on the day of their wedding and was like, why are all these people in my house? I don't think a middle class existence is actually what people are striving for anymore. Not even upper middle class.
About we want a good cultural fit because we want people who look like us, who think like us, who work like.
Why would anyone say they only want to work with people who look like them? That sounds like what the presenter just said, but I have never in my life said I only want to work with people who look like me, and I don't think many of you have either. Janice says, I have been a janitor, a concessionaire, web designer, and PCA, and none of this has ever come up. I don't even know what is going on, actually autistic. Yeah, that's not an autism thing, Janet. That none of us really know what's going on right now. You're good. You're good.
Like us. So diversity is tolerated if individuals adapt or conform to already existing cultural norms.
Then that's not diversity. If their requirement is to adapt to cultural norms, then that is like provably not diversity.
So what Desiree and I know from the research and for our own experience is how often folks of color talk about having to shut down huge parts of themselves to show up to the office.
Like what? Like what? I want a specific example of what people of color have to shut down huge parts of themselves in order to show up to the office. And by the way, most people have to like put their personal nonsense on the back burner when they're at work. That's why it's called work. You're hired to do a job. You have a set of responsibilities. You have a set of goals. You don't get to bring your personal baggage into the office. You have to leave that at home and deal with it later.
Because they cannot come as their full selves and fit in within these norms.
No one can come as their full self to work. If I had done my YouTube channel the way I wanted to do it while I was still doing, a lot of training in organizations, I would have been in a colossal failure because you can't bring your full self. You can't be authentic. It doesn't work out. None of myself, so far as I know. There you go, Janice.
And these norms can also be replicated in mostly people of color and people of color-led organizations. White supremacy and whiteness.
Organizations run by Black people can also be white supremacists. I don't know why you think they can't be white supremacists because they're operating in a capitalist structure. So obviously capitalism is white supremacist. So organizations operated by Black people can also be white supremacists.
Is the sea that we all swim in.
So why should we focus on race? And we get this question a lot as we're working with organization. But focusing on racial equity really provides the opportunity for us to introduce a framework and tools and resources that can also be applied to other groups that are being marginalized. And this is really important to us because for us to have the maximum impact, focus and kind of specificity. What is that word, Jessica?
Why are your teeth white, Carlin? That's racist. Yeah, I mean, obviously. Everything about me is racist. I'm a pasty white girl. I'm a pasty white Irish French girl, man. Can't do anything about it. August Brown says, in school they teach there are those who are white and then there are those who wish to be white, whatever. That is awful. What? That is incredibly racist. Why would anyone teach that?
Specificity.
Specificity,
right? We have to be able to focus on what we're trying to do. And so strategies to achieve racial.
Yeah, I feel like this person in the slide is being discriminated against and oppressed because they don't have a chair. And they're obviously a lower level assistant to this guy over here with the camera. Obvious racism right in this slide. I don't know why they even put this slide in here because it's obviously a racist slide.
Racial equity differ from those to achieve equity in other areas. One size does not fit all, right? And is rarely successful. So this racial equity framework that is clear when we talk about race. It is clear about the differences between individual,
Racist
institutional, and
keyboard.
structural racism. Right?
Do you guys see that Apple just came out with like purple phones and purple iMacs? I'm not gonna lie, I really do kind of want a purple phone and also possibly a purple iMac. But I'm like, this is like, this has got to be racist somehow. It's got to be racist somehow that they now have purple options.
This framework brings in history and the current reality of those inequities. Right? And again, has application that we can use with other marginalized groups in our communities. And let's be clear, the greatest and original sin of this country and the hardest nut to crack is race. And this is where our work really has to be focused.
Oh, God.
Great. And I know that there have been so many questions, and with thousands of people on this call, we're not going to get to all of them, which is why we're going to do more sessions this summer. But we will collect them, I promise you. And they're really great. So thank you.
Wait, okay. So let's just look at some of the things they're saying in this. So dominant group perspective is obviously going to be white people. Non-dominant group perspective is going to be everyone else. Janice says purple iPhones are racist. Yeah, exactly. Purple iPhones are racist, I'm sure. But look at this. They're saying that white people are unaware of their whiteness. I don't know how I don't know how it is flipping possible for any white people at this point to be unaware that they are white. I have no idea how that is even flipping possible. That white people are just always like, oh, look at how much progress has been made. Whereas everyone's also like, well, we still have a long way to go. Well, both of those things can actually be true. You don't have to choose between look at how much progress has been made and there's a long way to go. Both of those things can actually be true at the same time. They're saying that white people know little about non-dominant group culture. This is probably why they spend all their time telling white people like shut up and listen to black people and watch black movies and, you know, patronize black owned businesses. Probably why, because they assume that no one does, and that's obviously not true. Sees individual acts of harm, sees systems and patterns of harm. Again, you can see both. You can see both. I don't know of a single white person who supports redlining. Focuses on intent. Oh, so what they're saying is that non-white people only focus on impact, not intent. I don't think that's true. They're saying that white people make or enforce the rules, has the resources to do so, whereas non-white people experiences rendered invisible, not included in social and political discourse. Why? Dude, you're saying that non-white people are not included in the social and political discourse? Who is the vice president of the United States? Someone remind me of who the current vice president of the United States is. Someone remind me who the current speaker of the House is, because yeah, she's white, but she's also a woman. Someone remind me of how this is not included in the political discourse. This is ridiculous. Colin says grape juice extract phones and computers is how they are racist phones. That's probably true, Colin. And Tech Priest Fisher says, as a person of color, I'm happy they need to translate white speak for me. Such woke nonsense. Much actual racism. Well, you came to the right place if you want that. Oh, God.
Thank you for sharing those with us. All right, so in every category of social identity, and so when we say that, we're talking about things like race, gender, citizenship status, class, ability, sexual orientation, right? These places where we share identities with a social group. In each one of those, there's an identity that is considered dominant. So in the United States, that would be being a man, being straight, being, you know, having full citizenship.
They can't even think of another example other than straight man. That's the dominant group. Straight man, straight white man, dominant group.
Citizenship status, able-bodied. And then there's a group that is considered non-dominant, otherwise called marginalized and sometimes targeted. So that would look like
So they're saying that anyone who's not a straight white man is marginalized or targeted. That is a horrible thing to teach people. That is an absolutely horrible thing to teach people, that they are targeted and marginalized and oppressed. Horrible.
Folks of color, folks who don't have citizenship status, people with disabilities. So we've got this chart that Desiree and I created to illustrate some of the different ways that these groups orient themselves in the world.
Wait.
So I'm going to talk about...
Hang on. Look at this last one. I totally missed this one. The last one is creates thieves in systems based on their beliefs and can impede the success of others, laws, hiring practices, pay scales. And then they say non-white people navigate or survive in a system made by others. They're penalized for speaking out. Dude, there is a black woman presenting this webinar. Why isn't she being punished for presenting a webinar? Schwan Hammond says, I'm surprised Gabriel Iglesias didn't get canceled for his black iPhone joke. I'm not allowed to own a black iPhone anymore. I don't think anyone is. Right now, I have a gold iPhone, which I'm sure makes me racist. At least it's not a silver iPhone, I suppose, or a white iPhone would be the worst.
About the first three that relate to the dominant group perspective. So I'll talk about it from my perspective, and then Desiree will talk about it from her perspective, and we're going to do this based on race. And again, we're only going to get to those top.
For the record, Brandon just called me, and I just want you guys to know Brandon is fine and he's doing well. But he literally just called me while I was on the stream, so I'm texting him back.
Three. We want to share this whole chart with you, and we'll get more into them in follow-ups. All right, so the dominant group, so whiteness or being white in this situation, we're unaware of our groupness. So this means, as me growing up as a girl in New Hampshire, I never once thought about myself as a white girl.
Wait, is this the same person from the stream from before? Did I just miss this? Is this the same person? I don't think she is, but...
The majority of whites grow up in completely racially segregated areas. And we actually have the choice, if we want to make it, to never think about race. I will always be seen as Jessica and not a representative of white people. I'm never going to be called upon to give an opinion at a meeting on the white experience or asked how my people are feeling in this moment of socio-political upheaval. Desiree, do you want to pop in?
Yeah. So I've never not once in my memory of 54 years not been and seen myself.
I'm a psych nurse at a state psych hospital. Oh, I'm sorry. It's scary when your patients are making more sense, I'm going to say sense than the outside world. Dude, I hear you. That is a tough job, man. And they're probably more sane than a lot of these people right now, but you're doing the Lord's work.
As a Black woman, a Black girl, a Black woman. I know when I walk in spaces, I may be the only one. I never walk into a space where I don't try to find and look, are there people like me? Right? I've worked in many organizations where we, say, hey, these are some issues we'd love for folks to focus on.
Okay, guys, side note for this conversation, right now Nick Fuentes' little supporters are like attacking me on Twitter, and it's hilarious. Nick Fuentes is such a homophobic little fuck. I'm sorry. He tweeted out earlier, he was like, we cannot allow the party of Trump to become the party of Rick Grinnell and Caitlyn Jenner. And now all his little goipers are freaking out. We're like, Amy, get in. It's like, it's so crazy. Like, I'm like 2 seconds away from leaving the Republican Party and just letting the crazy Christians have it. I'm sorry. And I'm not talking about all Christians. I have no issue with Christians who are not forcing their beliefs onto other people. But like, if the Republican Party does not embrace this Caitlyn Jenner thing as the golden opportunity that it is, I just have no use for them anymore. That's kind of how I feel about it.
And to work on, and what management comes back and says is, you're right, we need to do that. But look at all the things we've done till now. Management is looking at, a short game. I'm looking at I'm looking at the long game. You're right. We appreciate those 3 things you've done. And we now have 18 more in front of us that we really need to take care of right now. And one thing about being part of a non-dominant group, you know everything about the dominant group. I always tell people, I know how to make white people feel incredibly comfortable because I've done it my entire life.
Holy shit! Guys, okay. Hang on. Let me show you something. I'm sorry. This is, oh. No, shan't, you little fucker. Oh my god. Okay, guys, I have to show you this. This is awesome. Okay, I'm sorry. We're interrupting this webinar. To give you a Nick Fuentes update. Because the crazy bitch that is Lauren Witzke is back. You guys remember that woman that I had to debate on Elijah Schaefer's show? Look at this. This woman is goddamn crazy. Look at this shit. Okay, so Lauren Witzke got banned from Twitter. And so, but she still has this hold the line pack thing. This is Lauren Witzke. And she has retweeted me calling Nick Fuentes a homophobic bastard. It says, we're going to deport your husband and have you arrested for immigration fraud. Lauren, sweetheart. I am so sorry, Lauren, that no one wants to marry you. I am so sorry that no one wants you, dear. I'm so sorry that no one wants a former drug mule who is now grifting to try to get a Republican nomination for God knows what. I'm so sorry, darling. But my husband isn't getting deported. Mwah. All right. I haven't heard from her in weeks. Oh my god. All right, back to our program. Hang on. Guys, if you appreciated me calling Lauren Witzke an old maid, please mount that like button for me. God knows Lauren Witzke isn't getting mounted anytime soon, so you might as well mount that like button. All right, back to our webinar.
It's how I've gotten promotions, raises, job interviews, right? I am fully versed in what does it mean to navigate white life. In the culture, the belief, the laws, the practices, the language. And this is how white supremacy continues. You know nothing about folks other than who you are. We know limited misinformation or no information about people who are not in a dominant group. And you get to live your entire life and never
This
lose
seems so
anything
like
because you've never
this
learned
seems so like
anything
depressing now,
about Black or
doesn't
brown
it?
people.
Doesn't even like listening to their voices? Like I just like had a moment of life where I was like, you know, calling Lauren Witzke out for her obvious bullshit, and now this webinar is just like it's bringing me down again. Like I was happy for a moment. I was happy fighting for a righteous and just cause of reminding Lauren Witzke that she's never gonna get a man to love her ever. And now I feel like I'm being brought down. I have to like, we have to calm down for a moment and return to and focus. Okay. I'm going to do this. We're going to get through it. 30 more minutes and half a bottle of wine.
Than your organization.
The Brooklyn Way says that mounted comment. Thank you, the Brooklyn Way. I will spend it wisely on a more expensive bottle of wine.
All right, so I'll talk to the look how much progress has been made and the knows little about non-dominant group from being white. And so when we look at white folks saying, look at how much progress has been made, this is the Obama got elected president and now we are post-race. And oftentimes that was the sentiment of moderate and liberal whites.
Wait, okay, so I just want to point something out. So it's so funny that that these people, the anti-racist trainers, are only going after the left now. They're not really even bothering with the real racists on the right. They're like, ugh, that's a lost cause. They're going after the liberals. Robin DiAngelo's new book coming out is targeted at progressives, basically saying, you're not doing enough to do the anti-racist work. You're not doing enough, white progressives. It's all on you. So it's kind of like they've written off the political right at this point, and they're starting to eat each other, which I think is just so interesting. Sean Hammond says, you got it right the first time, Sean. Okay, Sean. I guess. Sorry about that if I pronounced it incorrectly. And mount that like button, y'all. Mount that like button. Comrades.
This is me talking to a group of white women in their 70s, shortly after Donald Trump was elected, who were lamenting their lack of involvement in this work since the 60s, when they were marching for civil rights, and had thought that they had fixed things.
The civil rights movement didn't actually accomplish anything. I don't know why you think the civil rights movement accomplished anything, because they didn't actually, they thought they had fixed things, but they were wrong. The fact that we had a black president for 8 years is proof that the civil rights movement did not fix anything. And we need to become anti-racist because of the failures of the civil rights movement.
This is us focused on moments of progress, not the pattern of racial progress being followed either by white apathy or white blowback. So from a historical perspective, this is emancipation being followed by lynching and the formation of policing, the beginnings of the prison industrial system, or more recently, we can look at that white blowback as Trump being elected after our first African-American president. So part of the call in 2020 is that we not remediate to apathy or allow those who want to cling to the status quo to strike back around racial justice. And then in terms of knowing little about the non-dominant group, so I didn't see a Black person in a position of leadership until my second year at college. Growing up,
you grew up in New Hampshire and you think that you not seeing a Black person in leadership is proof of systemic racism?
My knowledge of Black people resided solely in what I saw on television and sports.
You grew up in New Hampshire. Okay, spoiler. New Hampshire is very white. We're not quite as white as Vermont, but we are actually very, very white. If you don't like it, move to a different city. Move to a different state. It's not that hard.
Reading books and in media. All industries, by the way, that are headed by white men at the margin of about 95% plus. You're taught that Black history is slavery, civil rights, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Oprah, and Obama. We miss both the richness and diversity of Black culture and the transformative and hard lessons.
Okay, I don't mean to sound dumb, because I understand that Black history is more expansive than slavery and civil rights and Obama and Oprah. But if you want to make the point that Black history is more expansive than slavery and civil rights and Obama and Oprah, then you should probably give some examples of how it's more expansive. Give specific examples. Let's see if she does.
We could have gained about ourselves and our country's history that may have allowed us to create a more just society a long time ago. Instead, we constructed a world in which we actually dehumanize ourselves as white people. We dehumanize ourselves by not giving us these opportunities and by commodifying and appropriating Black people and their culture versus doing the work to be in real relationship with them.
Radical Moderate says, oh my God, in your best Valley Girl voice, they list Girl Scouts as a client. Do they really? That doesn't surprise me at all. Who else is on their client list? Put some stuff in the chat. Tech Priest Fisher says, I'm so anti-racist, I can't name a damn thing Black culture is. I mean, that's, well, okay, so you're mocking them. I just want to be clear that there are many things that I'm sure we could all learn about history and Black, it's funny, a friend of mine who I will keep her anonymous to protect her. She was telling me she is this like just wonderful, wonderful Black lady who is going to be working on a story about this kind of like unknown queen from Africa who owned slaves, who started wars, who was a badass woman. And I was like, this is the most brilliant thing ever, because you're going to piss off people on the right and you're going to piss off people on the left by talking about a Black queen that owned slaves and participated in the slave trade. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I want to hear more stories like that. I want to hear those stories. And I think we should hear those stories. And I actually do think, like, it perturbs me a little bit because, like, I don't want those types of stories to get lost in this entire scenario, you know? Tails Fox said, did she just say African American? How dare she? It's people of color. She needs to get her facts straight. Report the webinar. Well, don't report the webinar just yet until we're done watching it, all right? But the link to the webinar is in the description, and you'll notice they've turned comments off. I can't imagine why they turned comments off on this webinar. I can't imagine.
Anything to add, Desiree?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that this is a lot on this slide that folks are looking at, and we cannot go into all of them, but I just ask y'all to take this and think about it, right? And in what ways have that dominant group perspective showed up in your decision making, on your teams, within your leadership?
All right, so I want to take a couple minutes here because I think a lot of you may be at this stage of coming into awareness about your racial identity.
What the fuck?
And so we want to talk through that. So we can think about being white and waking up to the realities of racism as a continuum that's marked by actually many shared steps and experiences. So by virtue of you being here and that you've stayed this long listening to us talk about white supremacy, I'm going to guess that you're no longer in the denial or unaware or actively racist phase of the journey. Which means that you probably find yourselves in what I call either the shame blame phase or the fire hose phase. So I'd like to invite everyone here who identifies as white or white presenting or white privileged to just take a moment and check in with your body.
And talk about,
oh shit, god damn it. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to pause it.
Shame. And if not now, you've probably felt this some way along your journey.
Wait, hang on.
Either the shame blame phase as a continuum. So we can think about being white and waking up to the realities of racism as a continuum that's marked by actually many shared steps and experiences. So by virtue of you being here and that you've stayed this long listening to us talk about...
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to go back to the beginning of this slide. I think I've had a little bit too much wine, and I heard something about checking in with my body if I'm white presenting, and I was like, I just need to listen to this slide from the beginning because I feel like this is some crazy shit, and I want to understand what they're saying. So I apologize to people who have to listen to it again.
All right, so I want to take a couple minutes here because I think a lot of you may be at this stage of coming into awareness about your racial identity. And so we want to talk through that. So we can think about being white and waking up to the realities of racism as a continuum that's marked by actually many shared steps and experiences. So by virtue of you being here and that you've stayed this long listening to us talk about white supremacy, I'm going...
No, it doesn't count. It doesn't count if you're still white. You're white presenting. That's all that matters. So okay, so seriously, so you guys know that mom that's suing her son's school in California, her son is not fully white, but he presents as white, and so the school wanted to try to make him admit that he was an oppressor because he's white presenting. It doesn't matter if you're half anything. It doesn't matter. As long as you present it as white, that's all that matters.
I guess that you're no longer in the denial or unaware or actively racist phase of the journey. Which means that you probably find yourselves in what I call either the shame blame phase or the fire hose phase. So I'd like to invite everyone here who identifies as white or white presenting or white privileged to just take a moment and check in with your body. How do you feel right now?
I feel fucking great. I have checked in with my body and I feel great. In fact, so great. We're going to do a cheers. Cheers with your drink of choice. If you have not mounted that like button yet, now is your time. But just check in with your body. How do you guys feel? Chat in how you feel in your body, white people.
How have you felt over the last week or two?
Awesome.
You might feel overwhelmed,
No.
anxious,
No.
resistant.
No.
Some of you might be feeling guilty, a sense of shame. And if not now,
Why? Why would I be feeling guilty or a sense of shame? These people are so intense. I have a whole series of studies on my desktop right now of the psychological impact of inflicting unnecessary shame on people. These people are going to do more psychological harm. It's ridiculous.
you've probably felt this some way along your journey.
Yeah, exactly. Feel the shame.
I'd like to
Do
explain
it.
why I think this is. Our lives are constructed so that we don't have to see race if we don't want to. That we can stay.
Dude. I don't think it's possible for any of us to not see race anymore. I used to be fine. I used to just treat everyone the same. I didn't care if you were black, brown, whatever. Just treat you the same, like a human being. It is now. I actually found myself like. Tell me if this resonates, because I watched so much of this crap. I have actually found myself treating people differently based purely on the color. Like, this crap has actually made me more racist. And I have to it's like I have to be, what does James Lindsay call it? Like, I have to be like a super anti-racist. I have to constantly be checking myself to make sure I'm counteracting the effects of this nonsense, because this crap makes me more racist. This crap actually makes me treat people differently according to their race. I see them like, oh, I don't want them to think that I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm colonizing the space or whatever. Like, I want people to feel comfortable, but it's like, it is a constant effort to counteract the negative impact of this, at least for me. Colin says, I wouldn't be surprised if they say time or science is racist next. I feel great being who I am in my skin, me being Irish. Oh, they have said science is racist. If Adrian is in the chat, Adrian will be able to tell you about how they have said that science is racist. They've absolutely said it. I have an article on my desktop that at some point I'm going to do a video about, but they've absolutely said that science is racist. Yeah, 100%.
Comfortable in our unknowing and our outright refusal to know. So that when we are faced to truly see the last thing that white supremacy wants us to see, let alone talk about, that aha moment of recognition, I belong to the group white people who are the oppressor.
What the
people
fuck?
Who built a
I belong to the group of white people who are the oppressor. Okay.
Country off of genocide and chattel slavery. A people that still.
These people really don't know that not everyone owned slaves in this country. I really think that these people believe that everyone owned slaves. A very small percent of the population owned slaves.
Reap all the benefits of it. A people that are still allowing many systems in our country to terrorize people of color, particularly Black people. Our entire worldview and sense of self is flipped upside down.
Unpopular says it's the racist whites who've actively avoided other cultures their whole lives, who cannot understand the multicultural whites, so they call us UNC bias. Yeah. Friends and Fishing with Paul says, go to the link and go to her channel's main page. There's 2 videos, this and one more. The comments are on. Ooh, pro tip, Friends and Fishing with Paul. We might have to check that out. Good find.
It's the belief that we've had that we have earned everything in our lives through hard work, and it is shattered by the realization that we have had a major head start due to the color of our skin.
I don't care how privileged your background is. You earn things in life because of your efforts, because of the actions that you take. I'm so sick of this crap. Like, I don't like, why is this group of people so intent on dismissing the hard work of other people? I'm sorry, I don't care if some rich kid like had a head start over me because I came from like a lower middle class family. I don't care. They still had to work to get what they get, just like I still had to work to get what I got. Is life unfair? Yes, life is not fair. We start from different positions, but these people seem to think that everyone is entitled to be like rich, powerful millionaires, and that's just not true. And in fact, most people wouldn't even be happy as that. Matthew says, I developed gender dysphoria because of the anti-misogyny lessons I endured. I learned to hate myself for being male. Yeah, I mean, this is sad. Like, this stuff teaches people to hate themselves. Let's see, we have another one. Your pal says, they're collectivists. It doesn't matter if only 1% of people own slaves or other people own slaves. You are your group first. That is exactly correct. Yes.
That even in the womb, we were already ahead because the healthcare system works much better for white folks going through the birthing process than it does for Black folks.
You're racist from the womb because the birthing process works better for white folks than it does for Black folks. That is incredibly racist.
The amount of safety and freedom we have taken for granted. I am always thinking about the amount of mental and emotional calories I have been saved my entire life because I've never spent time thinking, did I not get the job, the project, the raise because I'm white? Did I not get called on in class because I'm white?
Well, funny, it's kind of like, that's kind of like what someone might think in regards to affirmative action, isn't it? Like, someone who is the beneficiary of affirmative action to get into a school that they want to get into might always think, did I get into this school that I got into because of my race and not because of my competence? That to me sounds like she just literally described affirmative action. And to be clear, I'm not actually necessarily against affirmative action if I'm really honest about it. I've worked in college admissions, so I know it doesn't work like how most people think it does. But she literally just described affirmative action. Tech Priest Fisher says, does she got any of that research? Would love to see some data. All the problematic white data. No, they have no data. They have no data. I mean, we have 20 minutes left. Maybe they have data, but I strongly doubt that.
Is the reason I got pulled over, thrown on asphalt, because I'm white. As many educators say, it's not that you haven't struggled, it's that your struggles weren't tied to the fact that you're white. So when we allow all of this to finally register and we really bring it in, we're often flooded with guilt and shame. How could I have possibly not seen this before? And this often leads us to retreating from it, from trying to ignore it, which is exactly what white supremacy wants. Let's make white people so uncomfortable that they will deny it or run from it and keep holding up the status quo. Or we might jump into the fire hose phase. And this is where you start reading all the things, where you jump from awareness to action because you want to stop feeling this way. You want to be part of the solution.
This person has 100% read White Fragility. 100%. There's no question.
And so these are good intentions, but they often can manifest in unproductive ways, right? So this might be that you start calling out other whites with your newly found insights instead of calling them.
This is literally an entire webinar about calling out whites with newly found insights. And you notice they have the white person calling out the whites. This is all specific. You have the white person talking about white racial identity because she's in a better position to be a good little white ally to call out the whites.
Them into the conversation. This is the rush to get out the Black Lives Matter statement without talking to the right folks. This is about people who have been reaching out to every Black person they've ever met to tell them you're sorry and to ask them how they are, even if you don't have a real relationship with them. And so for the
I'm actually starting to think that this is the same woman that did the UNH webinar. I really am starting to think that because that woman, remember back like a couple of weeks when we did this webinar where the woman was like, I called all of my Black friends after George Floyd's death and none of them wanted to talk to me because she wasn't calling them from a genuine place.
Those of you who are finding yourselves in these phases, I'm really glad that you're here because guilt and shame and drinking from a fire hose is not going to get us free. It is not going to get us to Black liberation.
It's totally true.
And so what does?
Guess what? You're all on the FBI watch list for being here. You all now have an FBI file. Congratulations. Congratulations on your FBI files. Tails Fox says Biden, Fauci, and all the media are telling everyone to trust the science. Does that mean we are being told to trust racism? Yes. Yes, it does. Yep, it does. Matthew says, am I the only one uncomfortable with her using the term fire hose when talking about race relationship and civil rights? No, I think that is a really fair point. I agree with you. Someone needs to go back and watch the movie Selma.
That next step in this journey is that we slow down, we embrace humility, and we get to learning in community. That we take the time to truly integrate what you're learning. So I invite you to stop scrolling as much and really invest in the deep work of reading books, watching films, listening to podcast series that talk about race and whiteness, to talk to other white people about your experiences. Our job in this moment is actually to build our resiliency and capacity.
Can you also, like, do you guys notice that, and just because they've been on this slide for so long, look at the background that they're using of this. They're using like a typical kind of like suburban, like development background to indicate like white, upper middle class. You know what this reminds me of? Did anyone ever watch that show Weeds? That was a great show. I need to go back and watch Weeds. But like, this is like the beginning of Weeds. It's like these suburban, white, progressive, liberal women that live in these like nice developments. That's what they're trying to convey with this.
For discernment so that we can be effective anti-racist allies and come to a place of true solidarity. It is our job to leverage our skills and our resources to the tilt. What is it that you can bring to this movement? Because not all of us are going to be on the streets. I've had CPAs give their time to people of color-led organizations to do their taxes for free. Can you provide free childcare? Are you a project management whiz kid who can step up and help folks? The movement and people of color need all of these skills too. So what are your skills that you can bring? And finally, we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up for justice? Are we willing to push for equal pay even if it means you take a pay cut? Are you willing to cancel your big book launch because right now is not the time for white voices to take up a spotlight, as a friend of ours has done this week? Are you willing to form
a why would you cancel your book launch? Why would you cancel your book launch for someone that like obviously doesn't want to have you to have a book? There's no dude. Okay, I need to listen to that part again. Hang on.
CPAs give their time to people of color-led organizations to do their taxes for free.
Why do you assume that organizations led by people of color can't afford to hire an accountant? Why do accountants need to donate their time? Like, it's a job.
Provide free childcare. Are you a project management whiz kid who can step up and help folks? The movement and people of color need all of these skills too. So what are your skills that you can bring? And finally, we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up for justice? Are we willing to push for equal pay even if it means you take a pay cut? Are you willing to cancel your big book launch because right now is not the time for white voices to take up?
No, I am not willing to cancel my book launch because we don't want like that is incredibly racist. Now is just not the time for white people to publish books. Any white person that publishes a book in this time when they could be supporting a black person publishing a book, like, dude, if black people write a compelling book, it will be sold. It makes absolutely no difference if white people also write a book. Guys, spoiler. People can buy more than one book. You don't need to cancel the book launch of a white person in order for a black author to also be successful.
A spotlight, as a friend of ours has done this week. Are you willing to form a coalition and speak truth and demand equity from your bosses and board? Are we willing to ask ourselves in all of these spaces that we occupy, how is racism operating here in this moment?
It is not racist for a white person to have a book launch party. I'm sorry. It is not racist for someone who happens to be white to have a goddamn book launch party.
Because I believe...
And why are we even talking about this anyway? This was supposed to be... See, this is the problem. is I do these happy hour webinars and I always get lit in the back half of the webinar, and people are always like, Carlin, you've had too much to drink, you're drunk, you sound like a drunk. I'm like, no, I'm just frustrated because this is pissing me off. This is ridiculous. I haven't even had that much wine. I might pour myself another glass, though. I'm not going to lie. Hey, guys, mount that like button if you haven't already. Thank you.
That whiteness is the ultimate renewable resource. It's not going anywhere, and we can keep using it.
Wait.
And we keep progressing. And
whiteness is the ultimate renewable resource? Okay. August Brown says the soft bigotry of low expectations. Racist. This is all incredibly racist. It is incredibly racist to believe that because a white person has a book launch party, a black person cannot also have a successful book launch. That is incredibly goddamn racist. And why haven't they brought up that Robin DiAngelo is a white lady that's made millions of dollars on this training? Is that racist? Is Robin DiAngelo a racist? Well, actually, she is. She admits that she is in her own book. She says, I've been racist since the womb.
Until we're in a place of being actively anti-racist and in real solidarity.
Jessica, can I just add a line here for folks?
Always.
So 2 things that I really want folks to know. You
can always add in a line. You can always say something because you're black and I'm white.
We can hold each other accountable and hold each other with care. What we do not want is people getting in and doing this work where we're just literally replicating harm in the ways that we've been taught, right? So I don't want us replicating systems of supremacy. I'd rather you not make an outward statement around how you stand for Black lives if you don't have pay equity for the Black people in your company. Do the internal work, right? Do that work first.
Don't donate to Black Lives Matter until you have done the work. Do not post that picture on your Instagram page. Do not post that Twitter post saying Black Lives Matter if you haven't done the work. And that's actually a fair point. To be honest, like, okay, all jokes aside, this is actually an incredibly fair point. It's like what she's saying here, and we have to give credit where credit is due. What she's saying here is don't virtue signal. She's literally saying don't just say you're doing this stuff if you're not actually doing anything. I respect that. I do.
Care for the people in your sphere of influence. That's more important than some outward performative piece.
I find myself in rare agreement here. I really do. I agree with her that it is, if you actually believe these things, then it is more important for you to actually do something about it than it is to be performative. Listen, so there's this one guy in the knitting community. His name is Stephen West. He's like one of the most popular knitting designers in the world. I almost basically knit his patterns exclusively, which really pisses off some knitting designer friends of mine, but that's just like, I like his work a lot. And you know what I love about him is like he is like, you know, he's a lefty, he is, and his business partner is a lefty. But what they've done is they've actually put into action things in their yarn store. They've had like LGBT night in their yarn, well, but when they still had it open, they've actually done things. And instead of like, they don't call people out, they don't participate in like the cancel culture, they actually do things in their store. I have total respect for that, man. I don't think there is anything wrong with taking actions based on your values. I have a much bigger problem with people who do this to virtue signal and tear other people down than I do with people who are dedicating resources to lifting other people up. I think that that is perfectly fine. If you're making the choice to lift up people of color, to lift up women, to lift up LGBT people, while not at the same time tearing down like one who you consider an oppressor, I have no issue with that at all, because at least you're contributing to something productive. It's when people are tearing populations down that I have an issue with. But otherwise, like, you're following your values and there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't need an email from you. What I need to know is that everybody who's working for you is supported and seen and acknowledged and able to show up as their true selves.
All right.
That they're not getting microaggressed every day.
Oh, God, she ruined
that
it.
promotions are clear and that they're getting the support.
Just a reminder that microaggressions are not a real thing. They're not a real thing. The only research on microaggressions being a real thing is by the guy who invented microaggressions and makes money consulting on microaggressions. Those are the only ones who believe that it is a real thing. Does Carlin read all of the chat? Yes. Carlin does read the chat. I don't always respond to everything, but I do read the chat.
Support they need because they didn't start at the same place as other folks did. That is the work. So Jessica and I do audits, equity audits with organizations.
Oh, guys, look, we have our definition of whiteness. Okay. So to be white is to embrace urgency, have transactional relationships, embrace perfectionism, defeatism, and the right to comfort, knowledge hoarding, hidden power, and the fuzzy org chart. There's actually nothing fuzzy about an org chart. It's actually pretty simple when it's laid out on paper, but okay. Hidden power, lack of codification, individual. Those white people, they're always such individualists. Data-driven. Okay, so to be white is to be data-driven. Okay. Tasks over relationships, resentment and passive aggression, worship of the written word. I know exactly where this comes from. There is a document. If you actually Google this, like white supremacy culture and organizations, this document was created in like, I want to say it was like 2007. This document was created that's called White Supremacy in Organizations that laid out all of these things. Now, there's no research to back this up, but I know exactly where this is coming from. Okay.
Organizations, and we get a lot of feedback, a lot of data that shows us how white dominant norms show up within organizations.
This is not based on real data.
Norms from.
I'm going to pause this. This is not based on real data, just so we're all clear. This is not real, what they're about to talk about.
The work of Timo Kuhn and Kenneth Jones. And other of these are the work of Desiree Adaway and Jessica Fish. And so we don't have a lot of time to go through all of them. Again, over the summer series, we'll go through more, but we just wanted to really highlight the ones that we've seen in the past 2 weeks.
What they're essentially describing is a very specific type of workplace style that tends to be aggressive, that tends to not shy away from confrontation. They're describing a specific work style here, and they're describing one of the more problematic work styles that actually, causes a lot of trouble in organizations. But that's what they're describing. Their beef is not with white people. Their beef is with people who have a very specific type of work style.
Right. And so the first one that we've seen is this sense of urgency, right? Everybody had to get a letter out, a statement out. Forward.
In workplaces, there are schedules. In order to do your job, you have to meet the schedule. That's what that is. Renee says they make the stuff up as they go. People like them answer questions others asked years ago and or after the fact. That is exactly correct.
Forward facing to everybody in the world to let them know who they stand for. And I cannot tell you how many emergency calls that Jessica and I got this week from current clients, from former clients.
Okay, guys, I have to show you something. Pause. Okay, I just realized this. Hey, God, you guys are going to love this. Okay. Because Joshua and I actually talked about this on our show several weeks ago. All right, let me see. Application window. Okay, so here is my Twitter where I was retweeting Nick Fuentes, where he was like, we cannot allow the party of Trump to become the party of Rick Riddell and Caitlyn Jenner. And I said, oh, yes, we can, you homophobic bastard. Fucking Ruben replied to this. Dave Rubin replied to it and says, has he come out of the closet yet? Not yet, but maybe someday soon. Nick Fuentes will come out of the closet. All right, let's go back to our video. Dave Rubin is getting saucy. Oh my God. I feel like I'm rubbing off on him.
And from people we had never heard of before, asking if we could come in and help them, because guess what? They rushed to put out that statement. They didn't take the time to get the right people to the table. They didn't bring in the folks who were most impacted, and they didn't bring in folks who had an analysis who could help them. Right? This sense of urgency of making sure people with titles were there and not the folks with the right experience were there.
God forbid that people of certain positions are in meetings and not based off of whatever arbitrary things that people feel like they have to contribute. That's just the way meetings work. That is the way workplaces work.
Right? The skipping from awareness to action, this rush, this sense of, I have got to somehow be on the right side for marketing, or because people are feeling pressure from internal staff because they've never said anything before. Right? And so assuming that everyone would be able to work from home was one of the things we saw with COVID, this sense of urgency. Oh, take all your stuff, leave work on Friday, be set up and ready to work like normal on Monday. Right? Not taking into account the capabilities to work from home. Was caregivers there? Right? So this is very much a white male leadership expecting that everyone to have what they have, partners to help take care of kids.
That's not a white male leadership thing. That is a specific work style. It's called the dominant work style in DISC. That's what they're talking about. It's not, has nothing to do with, a white man can just as easily be the opposite of the dominant work style. Has nothing to do with your race and has nothing to do with your gender. There is no data point that backs that up.
Kids in the home, right? One of the things we saw is that male professors were cranking out papers during the first 3 months of COVID, like putting out all kinds of writings, and women professors weren't writing anything because they were trying to balance teaching from home, taking care of kids.
Wait, hang on. What is preventing women from writing? Just write. Dude, I wrote my first book between the hours of like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. every single night for 3 goddamn weeks. Like, if you want to write something, you find time to write.
And family. Right? And so how do we handle this? We handle the majority of this by slowing down, right? Let's take a breath.
Slowing down is actually the opposite of the work style they're talking about. So, and I see your pal says I'm the dominant style according to DISC. Yeah. So it's the dominant and conscientious style that they don't like for anyone who might be familiar with the DISC model. And so the dominant style in particular is a very fast-paced style, whereas something like the steady style would be slow-paced, more moderate-paced. That's what they're talking about. They don't have a problem with white men. They have a problem with the dominant work style.
Like, let's make sure we have safe practices around communications. Who are the people that we need and when, right? What are the safe checks that we need to have in place? Right? And creating place and time for your staff to be able to talk. So staff had COVID brain first, and now staff has Black staff now has police brutality, violence on top.
We had COVID brain at first. Now all we care about is police brutality. Remember that all of this stuff that they're talking about was happening at the same time as COVID, by the way. This is why. Okay, so fun fact, I actually did a live stream about this when it happened. When I was doing that manager coaching group during, like, to help managers transition to virtual work environments, at some point, like 3 months into the pandemic, I was like, all right, maybe we should think about going back to the office. And a lady in that group actually spoke up, and this is in front of everyone. And I allowed this person to come and join this coaching group for free because, like, I'm a good person. And she spoke, she's like, Carlin, it is white supremacist for people to go back to the office. And then she, like, reamed me out for being a white supremacist in my own coaching group and then hung up on the call, never to be heard from again, because I was a white supremacist for saying that people should work in an office. So they do conflate these two things, is my point.
Of it, right? Like,
oh my
God.
God.
Let's give people time and space right now. It's better to say the right thing after you've put some effort into it than to say the wrong thing because everyone else is speaking up. Anything to add there, Jessica, for urgency?
No, but I do want to make an announcement for folks that are here live, that if you're clicking on Q&A, before you ask your question, if you could click on the answered column to see if somebody's already asked it, and we'll save Rosie and Raven some of their fingers and typing. No, but I would love to talk about perfectionism.
Please do.
So perfectionism is something that I have thought a lot about. It's something that I have struggled with, particularly from spending a long time in academia. And what I have come to see deeply is that perfectionism is a tool of white supremacy. And that what is perfect.
So if we're looking at the DISC model, perfectionism is actually an attribute of the conscientiousness work style. It has to do with their accuracy tendencies. So the conscientious work style in the DISC model, like, it is black and white. There is a right answer and a wrong answer, and the conscientious work style is very concerned with not being perceived as wrong. Like, no one likes to be wrong, but people with the conscientious work style, like, they really don't like to be wrong. They're like the kids in school that wouldn't raise their hand unless they knew for sure they had the right answer. Whereas, other work styles might be like, oh, I don't really care if I'm wrong. It kind of sucks, but like, whatever. Like, they really don't like to be wrong. This is a work style thing. This has nothing to do with race. This has nothing to do with gender. This is a communication style. That is all that this is. Let's just be clear off the bat.
Is rooted in the ideals of whiteness.
And yeah. Virgos. Shatter Sound says, as a Virgo, I'm offended, very much a perfectionist. Virgos are very much the perfectionists. They are absolutely. I'm married to a Virgo. I have many Virgos in my life. I completely understand that.
This too is, if I can't do it right, I won't do it. I can't have the hard conversation. We confuse.
Yes, Capricorns are also white supremacists. Capricorns are white supremacists. Virgos are. So, fun fact, when I first started working with Joshua, this is like years ago, like way back in the day, I actually studied the correlation between I know I'm going to sound crazy. I studied the correlation between someone's astrological sign and their disc style. And it's not exact, but it is actually, someone's astrological sign is actually like a decent predictor of where they're going to fall out on the disc model. I did a whole study of this, of like dozens and dozens of people, and I found this to be true. I swear I need to go back and look that up, but like, I swear that that's true. Disc for Aquarius is going to be more like Aquarius is all about like thought, right? It's going to be, I don't know. I don't know. I've had too much wine to answer that question. So it's going to be like the opposite of the conscientiousness style, essentially. It's going to be the I style, the influence. Oh, God. Now you guys are asking me questions. I don't know. Maybe we'll have Joshua answer this question on Tuesday.
Making a mistake with being a mistake, as Tema Okun says.
God. I opened like Pandora's box there by bringing up astrology. Okay, so if you guys have never seen my show with Joshua on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, maybe we'll have this conversation on Tuesday, but definitely come to our show. We talk about astrology and psychic tree and all that good stuff. And it's fun. So we'll talk about it there.
So I've seen this a lot lately in the question that Desiree mentioned, how do I talk to my Black colleagues about what is happening right now? I'm scared that I'll do it wrong. And this is where we have to take some risk, because you might. And this is where we have to take action after we have our analysis, so that it's not just platitudes. And we don't want to speak in euphemisms, because perfectionism might have us thinking that we don't want to say the direct thing. We might want to talk about the events of this week versus structural and state-sanctioned violence and anti-Blackness. And this leads me to that a culture of nice isn't going to get us free.
A culture of nice isn't going to get us free. So if you didn't come to the happy hour 2 weeks ago, we literally did a webinar called Anti-racism is not about being nice or something like that. These people are basically looking. Here's what this is. These people are basically looking for reasons to be assholes. They're looking for justification to act out, to bring up to destroy the self-esteem of other people. Probably because they don't have a lot of self-esteem themselves, so they need to destroy the self-esteem of other people. They need to act out in response.
A good friend of ours, Dr. Heather Lane Talley, wrote about, in terms of perfectionism, it's also oftentimes to working beyond capacity, and that striving for perfection leads to resentment, and someone's going to pay for the resentment. Oftentimes there are going to be outbursts. We lash out, particularly as white people. And when the work doesn't go according to plan, someone is going to be blamed and likely penalized. And given the existing power structure, people of color disproportionately pay the consequences for that. And oftentimes, Desiree and I see what happens even to Black women who are the ED or CEO of president of an organization, and how they are being blamed in ways that we would never blame somebody who is white in that role. And so something we want to think.
I feel like these people have never worked in actual work environments if they think that white people never get blamed for anything in the office. White people get blamed for stuff all the time in the office, but it usually has nothing to do with them being race or like their race. It has to do with them screwing up. Or sometimes not even screwing up. They could get blamed for something if someone doesn't like their attitude or someone doesn't like their communication style. White people get blamed for shit all the time.
About here is creating white employee working groups so that white staff can practice getting it wrong and developing their analysis together and taking that burden of education off of people of color. I want you to name how perfectionism shows up in your organization.
Did she just say that white people should offer to take the blame for people of color? Is that what she just said? Let's see.
So that white staff can practice getting it wrong and developing their analysis together and taking that burden of education off of people of color.
That's what she said. Holy shit. I thought I was just drunk. Hang on.
And when the work doesn't go according to plan, someone is going to be blamed and likely penalized. And given the existing power structure, people of color disproportionately pay the consequences for that. And oftentimes, Desiree and I see what happens even to Black women who are the ED or CEO of president of an organization, and how they are being blamed in ways that we would never blame somebody who is white in that role.
First of all, if you are the executive director or the CEO of an organization, everything that happens in that organization is your responsibility. So don't pawn this off on other people. If you are the executive director or a CEO of an organization, if you take on that responsibility, then everything that happens in that organization is your fault. I don't care if you're Black, brown, what have you, man, woman, gay, straight, cis, trans. It is your responsibility when you accept that job that everything that happens in that organization is your responsibility.
And so something we want to think about here is creating white employee working groups so that white staff can practice getting it wrong and developing their analysis together.
What the fuck?
And taking that burden of education off of people of color.
This woman literally just argued that white employees should take the blame for the Black executive director or CEO, to practice taking the blame. So a subordinate to a Black executive director or CEO, one of their subordinates who happened to be white, they just argued that it is their responsibility to step up and take the blame, even if it's something that the CEO's fault. And if they don't step up and take the blame and become a martyr, then they're racist. Okay.
I want you to name how perfectionism shows up in your organization and think about what you're losing because of it. And we want to resist the glorification or celebration of busyness, of perfection. And think about giving more positive feedback when we see our colleagues honoring their needs. And this is more important than ever right now.
Yeah. And I know that there are a bunch of type A personalities out there that want to do everything perfect, that we've been taught we can just learn our way into doing these things. And y'all, we make mistakes about so many things in life, but
Making mistakes about so many things in life is a fundamentally different proposition than a white employee purposefully taking the blame for something that is the responsibility of a black CEO because they don't want to be racist. Those are two different GD things. And I'm sorry, any CEO worth their salt is going to step up and say, I am not going to allow any of my employees to take responsibility for something that is my responsibility. And again, I don't care if you're man, woman, black, white, gay, straight, trans, cis, like whatever. Any CEO worth their salt is going to volunteer to take responsibility for what happens in their organization.
white supremacy has taught us we can never make a mistake with this. That if we make a mistake, that we're horribly bad people. And I say that is not true. We get to make mistakes. We're all worthy of being able to fix it and repair and move on.
Well, that's true. We all can make mistakes, but in this ideology, there is no path to redemption. For white people, there's no path to redemption. And making mistakes is different than taking the blame for someone else. God.
We cannot let shame or guilt
What is
keep
wrong
us
with these
frozen
people?
from doing the work.
We can't allow shame or... So she just argued that it is shame and guilt that prevents white employees from taking the responsibility for mistakes that the black CEO or executive director might make. It's white. That's the only thing. The only thing that prevents white employees from taking the blame is white guilt. It's not that they didn't do anything wrong. It's not that it was actually the black CEOs or executive directors' fault. It's just white guilt. Please. And yes, I did just fill up my wine glass. This is the last of the bottle. I wasn't even planning on drinking this much today, and here we are.
I'm going to step in and talk about relationships. And if you've ever heard me teach before, one thing that I'm very clear about is I am transactional with systems and institutions, and I am only ever transformational with people and relationships. This is an ethos, and it is the way I've chosen to live my life and do my equity and inclusion and justice teaching from this place. And so we're socialized to compete with one another, right? There must be a winner, so someone has to lose. We're socialized to never push against the status quo or to be punished. We're socialized to be quiet and polite and not ask for what we need. White people are socialized that comfort is a value and is your right, right? That everything should be controlled, that people are never allowed to make mistakes. We're socialized to this deeply internalized fallacy, the fallacy of supremacy, which we maintain via legal and economic systems, right? And so that does not keep us in right relationship with one another. Do we want rigidity or do we want relationships? I only trust and take feedback from people that I know are in deep relationship with me. And so the majority of this work is actually this piece here. How do I build real and right relationship with folks? How do we build community? And so the things that we want to think about, right? What are these deep qualities of authentic relationships? A willingness to hear the anger from folks and not take it personally, right? Anger and rage are understandable byproducts of oppression, right? How not to be defensive and take it personally when non-dominant folks need to talk about their anger and pain in powerful ways. We have to be willing to remain in relationship.
I'm not doing commentary right now because I'm just like kind of over this and I just want it to be over. We have 7 more minutes.
Together. Most of us are not practiced or proficient in building real relationships, right? And this process is fluid and it is continually open for redefinition. And these relationships have to constantly be nurtured and they have to be open to tension. And they have to be designed to create sustainability. So I've been one of those Black people getting random messages from people. And while I appreciate them on a certain level, there is a real piece of me that is like, oh, I didn't hear from you in the beginning of COVID. When I'm literally watching Black people die in this disproportionate way. Like, you didn't reach out then, but you're reaching out now. Right? Because the people who reached out to me in February and March, and the people who reached out to me, in November or October when I was microaggressed or that thing happened, like those are people I'm in deep community with.
Does she expect everyone to be a mind reader to know exactly when she feels microaggressed against? Is that what I'm hearing? It's not good enough that people reach out and say, how are you doing when this thing that we think you're going to find deeply traumatic is like going on? She wants people to like read her mind and know that she feels microaggressed against and reach out then.
So we have to be willing to remain in relationship and understand that it will be changing and that's okay, but we're committed to doing that work with each other. One of the things Jess can always teach about is when I have to say something, when I have to have a difficult conversation, is what do I want my relationship to be like with that person at the end of this conversation? And then the last thing I want to talk about is we have to be willing to understand the power of language. Right? That language is influenced by racism and sexism and systems of dominance. And language contains inherent bias and prejudice and power. So we always have to be open to understanding and unraveling our use and misuse of language with one another.
And Desiree, I just wanted to say, to add to that,
I think this is a goal that everyone should strive to achieve, to drink with me. And, for the record, when I had my locals meetup on Saturday, last Saturday in Los Angeles, I may have had 1 or 2 margaritas. I may have had maybe 1 more margarita than I should. So if you guys ever get a chance to come to one of my locals meetups, you want to join my locals, I want to do more meetups in person. I want to go back to LA. I want to have one with Joshua. So, and you might actually get a chance to drink with me in person and complain.
That there's always room for growth and redemption. And
no, there is no room for redemption in this lifestyle. What the hell are you talking about? All right, let's read their calls to action. You notice how they've conflated COVID and Black Lives Matter in this? This is weird. I don't understand exactly why they did this, but whatever. Oh, Cindy asks, are you still speaking at Faith and Freedom in Dallas? Yes, I am. This will be my return trip to Dallas from the last time I was in Dallas, we got chased by Black Lives Matter. So hopefully that won't happen this time. I mean, this webinar aside, but I will be speaking at the Faith and Freedom Conference in Dallas. Maybe I'll try to do a little meetup in Dallas. Maybe we'll try to do that. But come to the Faith and Freedom Conference. It's going to be awesome. All right. Calls to action. Stay humble, inquisitive, and listen deeply. Begin naming the norms we talked about today when you see them happening. How is structural racism at play in your sector? You notice they actually haven't really talked about the work environment at all in this entire GD webinar. They really haven't. Slow down. Deepen your analysis. Have people who are the most impacted at the table given real power before you take action. Be more transparent and communicative. What really is the budget situation? I love how they have a random workplace question in there without any context. Center the most vulnerable. Are people's basic needs being met? Re-COVID and re-Black. I mean, again, I don't understand why they're conflating the two. I don't know. This is weird. Tech Priest Fisher says, question for this lady, is a workplace that's 90% black. How does anything she just say work? Asking for, hang on. In a workplace that's 90% black, how does anything she says work? It doesn't work. It doesn't work because none of what she's talking about has to do with workplace dynamics or getting things done or anything like that. What she's talking about, again, it's like work styles. That's what she's really referring to. So none of the, it doesn't even matter if the organization is not 90% black. If the organization is 100% white, the things that she's talking about still are not going to work because she's framing them in the wrong context. Who are your vendors, your partners? Are they all white? You have people of color who are your vendors and partners? When you start thinking about who's going back to the office, who gets a private desk? Are you only giving the private desk to white people? How dare you? How dare you? It shouldn't be based on rank or title or job function or any of these things. It should only be based on race, who gets a private desk and who doesn't.
And, you know, I've heard folks say this week, you know what's going to mean the most to me is if my colleagues step up and in the moment that the next racist or microaggression or somebody's being super biased, when the next time that happens, that they say something out loud and in the moment.
Have a struggle session. Why not have a struggle session? Come on.
And it is a skill. And as one of these calls to action, it is this piece around we have to stay humble, inquisitive, and listen deeply. I would love for you to begin naming the norms that we talked about today when you see them happening, and investigate how is structural racism at play in your sector.
Yeah. You can't be anti-racist and be scared. The only way you can be...
No. Anti-racism is all about fear. This is all about fear. At all times, we are operating from one of two basic emotions. We're either operating from love or from fear. This is not operating from love. If you're telling people that they need to take the blame for things that they did not do because they are white, that is not operating from a place of love. That is operating from a place of fear that black people are going to get blamed for everything just because they're black, even if they're the executive director or the CEO.
Truly anti-racist is to be brave. And that's the bottom line.
You're not brave if you're not an anti-racist. Okay. I mean, honestly, so I used to do, how I used to make a lot of my money was by doing manager training programs. That was my number one seller by far. I have a great goddamn manager training program. My manager training program is awesome. I have clocked my manager training program when it's implemented effectively to increase productivity by like up to 30%. Just by changing the way they work together. And that's legit. That's not like diversity nonsense. That's actually real. And I can't even do that manager training program anymore because of this like anti-racist crap. And it's not necessarily that I can't. I suppose I probably could. I've thought about just putting it online as like an on-demand course, but it's also like I just feel like I would get so much hassle from it that it might not even be worth it. But you know, I don't know how people deal with it. I really don't. I'm so grateful that I don't have to right now.
So we have a couple minutes. We just want to say, here are some calls to action, right? So we're dealing with COVID and we're dealing with Black uprisings. So here's some to-do things that you can do the minute you get off this webinar. Stay humble and inquisitive and listen deeply.
White people can't be humble.
Begin to name the norms that we talked about today around you. Always question, how is structural racism at play? It is not if anti-blackness is in the
Cancel
room,
the performance process for 2020. What the fuck? Hang on. I missed that one at the bottom. You guys see this? Cancel the performance process for 2020. So people just got to pass in 2020. They didn't actually have to achieve goals. Okay.
It is not if racism is in the room. It is how is it being played right now in this space. Slow down, deepen your analysis. Have the people who are most impacted at the table, giving them real power before you take action. Be more transparent and communicative, right? Always center the most vulnerable. Are people basic needs being met?
I'm a woman, and therefore I declare that I'm the most vulnerable, even though I'm white. So you have to center my opinion and beliefs because I'm the most vulnerable. And I've been sexually assaulted in the work environment, so that makes me especially vulnerable. I would totally play that card. I would absolutely play that card 100%. If I was operating in this system, I would 100% play that card. And that is the problem with this entire scenario, is it encourages people to see themselves as perpetual victims when they are not.
Can you offer mental health days? Bring in therapists, redistribute workloads.
Well, I actually don't think, okay, entirely selfishly, I actually don't think that offering coaching to your employees is a bad idea. Because a lot of employees get in their own way. So this whole idea of like therapists, I'm not actually opposed to that.
Right? Do not ask or expect Black colleagues to educate you or lead you to this work. Right? We're going to send some list of resources, but let's be clear. We don't need any more lists of resources made. There are a million resource lists. There are a million reading lists. Jessica, what else are there? Like, there's so much information out there.
But we will send you some of our favorites because we can't help not to do that.
Yeah.
So
you want to take the
your,
list? Yeah.
Yeah. So who are your vendors and partners? What would it look like if you actually centered who are the folks that are on your cleaning and janitorial staff? These folks are typically outsourced. They are not going to have the same experience coming back to work from COVID. How are you going to ensure that they are safe? When you start thinking about going back to the office, who's going to get that private desk? Who's going to get to keep working from home? Who's going to have to take the subway? And this one, cancel the 2020 performance process.
Oh, they're very passionate about this.
Doozy. And instead, we invite you to update and clarify work plans.
Listen, if workplaces were doing the performance review process well, there would be no need to cancel it because there would be no surprises. You'd be having weekly meetings with your employees. You'd be doing updates with your employees. They would know exactly where they stood. So any organization that actually canceled the review process is not doing workplace reviews well in the first place and could probably use my manager training, which they'll never hire me for because I make videos like this on the internet now.
That are realistic for folks. All right, so we have 1 more minute. Desiree, next slide.
Yes.
All right, so we made something for you all. So every summer for the last 3 summers, we have offered Whiteness at Work as a summer series. And it is a couple of additional classes that you can sign up for. If you pop over to the AdawayGroup.com, it's under the classes tab, or you can /
Okay, now it sounds like they're just doing marketing, so we're going to stop there because that's enough. That's enough. I can take no more, but I will highlight Alexandra's super chat. Thank you, Alexandra. Hey, everyone. Happy Friday. Have you mounted that like button? Last chance, guys. We're going to wrap up the webinar in a second. Oh, God, 2.5 hours. Jesus Christ. All right. So, I don't know. That was crazy. That was a crazy webinar. I just can't with you. Dude, like, what bothers me more than anything about these webinars is that they're all the same. Like, I've done maybe like 4 or 5 of these now. These webinars are all the same. They all say the same thing over and over and over again. They never present data. They never present anything that's other than like their lived experience or their perception. It's all based on the same information. These people are grifting so hard on the work environment. It is ridiculous. Black Magic says Carlin is buzzed. Yeah, I am a little bit buzzed. I am. I'm over it. I'm over. I've got Nick Fuentes' groipers coming after me on Twitter. I've got to call Brandon back because he called me while I was on the webinar. So we're going to wrap it up for today, guys. But happy Friday. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. Remember, Fridays, 3 p.m., we'll do happy hour. We'll watch crazy training. We'll make fun of it. It's how we cope. But again, if you want to join me, I did just launch a Substack. You can join my locals community. Locals is the best option, kb.locals.com. The information is down there somewhere. I don't even know. But hope to get to know many and more of you. Have a great weekend, guys. And we'll see you next week, and we'll keep up the fight. All right, guys. I'll see you soon.